Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book Leadership as Masterpiece Creation, no other than Mr. Charles Spinosa. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Charles, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you for letting me have access to your audience. I really, really appreciate it. I'm Charles Spinosa. I've been a management consultant for the last 27 years. Over that time, I've worked in Europe, the US, a little bit in Asia, and Latin America. I've worked mostly on leadership development, on helping organizations change their culture, and on developing new propositions for customers. Those are my three basic things. As you can see from the title of the book, I have an attachment to the humanities. The subtitle is What Business Leaders Can Learn from the Humanities. And before I was a consultant, I was a professor in the humanities. I taught Shakespeare at Miami University in Ohio, and I taught philosophy at UC Berkeley. And it's bringing those things together. What I've done over my consulting career is I've brought those two things together. And I think rather richly over the last 10 years of my consulting career, where I helped leaders turn their organizations into masterpieces.
So, Mr. Charles, how does the concept of leadership as a masterpiece differ from traditional views of leadership?
Wow, it differs in lots of ways. Why don't I say a little bit about what a leader does who creates a masterpiece organization and changes his community, and then I can talk about how that's different. Well, I'll start a little bit with what it's different. Most people, in fact, when I began my consulting career, we believed that people in business, leaders in business, were out to gain market share by making customers happy, increase profits to make owners happy, and assign themselves to some culturally appropriate purpose to make employees happy and other stakeholders happy. And most of business school and most of what consultants do and most literature gives leaders recipes. And leaders follow recipes, and that's how we think of them. And I think I came to see that it's very wrong. The leaders I dealt with all had a sense, or all but very, very few had a sense of what the right way was in their industry to deal with a customer, what the right way was in their industry to deal with their employees, what the right way was to deal with owners and suppliers. And when I say right, they had a moral sense of what was right. So it was wrong to take advantage of long-term customers, even though they wouldn't leave, and give all sorts of breaks to new customers. People just felt that to be wrong. And there were many things like that were wrong. And it took me a while to put it together. But what leaders wanted to do, although everybody was telling them not to, was take their sense of what was right and create an organization that represented it and see if that succeeded in the world. And if it succeeded in the world, they would have a morally distinctive organization that represented them. Now, the way to get a sense of what this looks like is think of the small businesses in your neighborhood. Small business leaders do this all the time. The way customers are treated in one restaurant is different from the way customers are treated in the one next door, different next door. In my community, there are two hardware stores. One hardware store you walk into, you hear classical jazz, and there are all sorts of people to help you. That's a way to treat customers. In the next one, you walk in, you smell 3-in-1 oil, and people are on the ladder sorting goods, but customers are supposed to be do-it-yourselfers. That's a whole different way of treating customers. And the two different owners think that's right. And if we look at the top, Jeff Bezos, Anita Roddick, people who are the top shapers in industry, Ray Dalio and others, they're doing the same thing. They're creating a business that they believe is morally right. And what happens is it's all the leaders in the middle to whom my book is addressed, who end up thinking they should follow recipes and only a little bit incrementally behind their back a lot of time get to do what they think is right. I can say more about that, but maybe I should let you speak, Daniel.
Very well said. Mr. Charles, very well said.
Thank you.
And I'm going to give you a applause for that. So, what can business leaders learn from artists, writers, and philosophers about decision making?
Okay, well, the most important thing they can learn is to cultivate their moral imagination and to understand that they are making moral choices all the time throughout the day. What you learn in the humanities all the time is basically to develop a moral imagination. What's a moral imagination? It's really the capacity to look at the world not just from the other person's perspective. That's empathy. We can call that empathy. A moral imagination is where you can look at the world from the perspective of a different moral order. So can we look at the world from, say, what things looked like in the 1950s? Gender relationships were completely different. The sense of religious importance was completely different from today, for instance. And if you can do that, if you can look at the world from the perspective of different moral orders, then you get to see all sorts of opportunities. And that's really important. One of my first consulting engagement was helping to sell cement to poorer Mexicans. And we had to look at the world from the angle of poorer Mexicans. But really what helped us was to look at poorer Mexicans from the way they looked in the 1950s. And we were able to see all sorts of possibilities for ways to sell cement to them so that they could build much faster, save more money, and so the cement company could also save more money. It was a very successful engagement. So the first thing is gaining a moral imagination. And to gain a moral imagination, you have to really understand the differences of people. You don't just look at things through their shoes. That's what empathy does. When you're empathetic, you tend to see what they enjoy from their perspective. You tend to see how they feel victimized from their perspective. But you don't see deeper than that. You don't see why, for instance, they might hate themselves from their perspective. What's deep bothering them? It doesn't carry that much weight. You don't see why they would dislike you that much from their perspective. You don't see what moral sense of things they take for granted from their perspective. And that, to me, is really what's critical. That's the moral imagination. Let me give you a simple example. Why would that be important? When Anita Roddick looked at the beauty business in the 1970s, she saw a moral order. The moral order was, you want to appear attractive? The only way to appear attractive then was to appear young, very young, and slender. And the idea was then, it was an industry that created anxiety and sold miracle cures. Put this on and you'll look much younger. You couldn't really look younger. But that was the kind of moral order. And people inside that thought it was great. Look at the beautiful, glamorous ads they produced to show what a beautiful world could be if everybody looked younger. And they loved that moral order. Anita Roddick thought it was deceitful, and she disliked it. And then on that basis, she didn't just complain. She tried to create an alternative order. She tried to create a skincare store that cared about fun and compassion, that wanted to have a traditional understanding of taking care of the body. And she brought those two things and set that up against the moral order of the industry, and that way displaced the industry. And that way, the Body Shop is her masterpiece, and it displaced the moral order of the beauty industry. It didn't get rid of it, but it set up another one, and stores like Sephora and others like that still live out of the tradition of Anita Roddick. And so looking at things and getting with a moral imagination is something you learn from the humanities. There's one other thing that you learn from the humanities that is really important, and that is taking moral risks. You don't change a moral order without breaking moral conventions. And when you break moral conventions, people think you're doing something wrong. And it is not safe, and it's not easy. And one of the things that I believe the humanities can teach you is how to cultivate courage instead of what everybody right now is talking about in business, which is cultivating safety. And that's the other big thing. Go ahead, Daniel.
So, Mr. Charles, what are some historical examples of leaders who treated their work as an art form?
Okay, well, Anita Roddick is one that I would take on, that I mentioned. In the book, I deal with Madam C.J. Walker, who basically created a business where she could help Black women regrow their hair because there were all sorts of scalp problems. What she did was she changed not just the capacity, how you took care of your hair, she changed what it felt like to be a Black woman and to have a strong personality. And in fact, she created a moral order which led in many ways to the way women behaved in the Harlem Renaissance. And her daughter was sort of one of the heroines of the Harlem Renaissance. And these women were much more assertive than women had ever been before. So we can that's one example that's more historical. A controversial example that I happen to love because we're still living in the change is pretty simple. It's Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos created Amazon, and he created it on the values of relentlessness. He worked people very hard, and some people don't like that about Jeff Bezos, and customer fanaticism. And in creating Amazon on the basis of those two values, he created a business that was quite unusual. Some people say it's like investment banks, but the customer fanaticism, I believe, made it different from investment banks. It had all the hard work of investment banks. That's true. What he did was he turned that relentlessness into the convenience that we have today in the market. And it's not just the online market. He is making hyper convenience something that we expect all over. It's rather amazing. When Amazon first started, what were the reasons you'd shop at Amazon? Well, it had a huge selection, virtually infinite selection of virtually anything. It started out books, but soon was in other places, and the prices were good. That was its business model. It wasn't bricks and mortar. It was all online. But now if you ask your friends why they like Amazon, if they like Amazon, I find that 7 out of 10 people say, I love the speed with which it's delivered, and I love the return policy. It's so easy. It's so convenient. So the whole business model, why people love the store, has changed to this hyper convenience. And I think if we ask ourselves, when we go to restaurants, when we go to places in our neighborhood, and it's slow, we sort of wish we could have the hyper convenience of Bezos's Amazon. And then it's becoming a norm for retail in general. And that's what these leaders do. They change the norms, what we consider right and what we consider wrong in their markets, in larger markets and larger communities.
So how can leaders incorporate humanities-based thinking into their daily decision making?
Okay, I think there are two ways. The first is I basically go through with leaders a 3-step process, and it's closely based on the humanities. The first is what always goes wrong in your industry. And when I say what goes wrong, what is the moral wrong? What is the thing that you're doing wrong that you should not do? That comes from the kind of moral imagination of the humanities. Now, the funny thing is, for me, most leaders that I talk to don't have a problem with that. They're already thinking in a way that you would get from the humanities, where they're looking at the world in terms of moral rights and wrong, in terms of moral orders. They're already doing that. they don't have permission to do it. And so essentially I give them permission and say, okay, let's do it. What always goes wrong here that nobody's changing, that you're always working around because you're a brilliant manager. There are all sorts of things that go wrong. And if you're a brilliant manager, you can work around it without upsetting a whole lot of people. Let's say we're going to upset people and find out what's wrong. The next thing, this, Daniel, this will surprise you. And as I say it, I promise you it's true, but it still surprises me. The next question for any leader is, how would you love things to be? Now, it's amazing how hard that is for them to answer. Why is that hard for leaders to answer? Well, they've been trained with tons of recipes for how to grow more, how to get more profits, how to get more productivity. They have all of that stuff, and they're really good at it. They didn't become leaders because they weren't good. And there is no recipe for answering the question, what do you love? What would you love? And that's a problem. Now, if you think about poetry, if you think about literature, what is that offering you? It is offering you something you love. That's why we read it. It's giving you a golden world, let's say, that you love. It's giving you a fuller world, a richer world that you love. And that is what I essentially am asking the leaders to do with the question, what would you love? The next question, third question after that, is what risks do you need to take to get there? Once we get through what would you love and what are the benefits of doing what you'd love, the risks to get there, leaders are pretty good at that. But again, those risks are moral risks, and that requires thinking of your business, thinking of the future in terms of a story that you're telling. Who are your opponents going to be? How are you going to defeat your opponents?
So, Mr. Charles, what would be your advice for those people out there who want to be a leader in any aspects?
Okay, my advice is, first of all, to hone your moral imagination. And I'm going to say a little bit, I sort of skipped over part of my answer to your last question. If you're a manager, you are already beginning to act like a leader in one respect, or maybe two or three. But the first one is, as a manager, you are always thinking, should I stretch that employee? Should I push that employee harder to achieve more? Should I ease off of that employee? Should I let the troubles in that employee's life be what the employee focuses on, and so forth? You're always making those questions. Those are moral questions that you're asking, and you're always taking risks. I just today, I was coaching a woman who I believe could become a very powerful leader, and she had a traumatic past, and she has been spending a lot of time avoiding that. And so when people ask her who she is and what she does, she gets shy and she can't talk. She can't create a person that they trust. And so I've been pushing her to confront her past. That's what managers do. And every time you do that, you're pushing someone and you don't know if you've got it right. You're hoping you've got it right. You feel fear and trembling to make sure if you get it wrong, you can stop and pull back. Those choices. So look at the choices you're making as a leader from a moral perspective and push yourself to get it right and refine your imagination. Then you'll start with your employees if you're a manager. If you have responsibilities that enable you to be customer facing, the same goes there. You always have some leeway to change the way your organization deals with customers. Should we give them more care? Should we pull back and let them be more do-it-yourselfers? There's a huge scheme there. Where you end up on the scheme, that's a moral decision. Likewise, your suppliers. If you get to decide which supplier you have, there's a big contrast between win-win contracts and win-lose contracts, and where you are on that. And one of the funny things is, most leaders I know, most managers I know, say that they want to go create win-win contracts, and they try to do it, but they're afraid to give the information so that the person they're negotiating negotiating with knows that this is a win-win opportunity. So they shoot themselves in the foot. But all the ways that they're shooting themselves in the foot, those are moral decisions. If you look at it morally as opposed to game playing, I believe you'll make better decisions. And those are the places where you can start. I can go on and on. How do you build trust? Let me say a word about that. I deal with managers all the time, managers striving to be leaders. Everybody says trust is based upon reliable performance. You make a promise to someone, you fulfill the promise, you build trust. You only build reliability that way. You don't build trust. Trust is a far more heartfelt emotion. You build trust by knowing who you are, as I was doing with that woman today, and showing your virtues. And if people admire those virtues, they will trust you. You stop showing those virtues, you'll take it away. What are my virtues? You hear it all the time. I'm an explainer. If you like people who explain things, if you think that that's a virtue in the world, then you'll find me trustworthy. If you don't, then you won't find me trustworthy. Build trust by understanding what your virtues are and manifesting them. Again, it's a moral question. What are my virtues? That's a moral question. Think it through. Make sure you manifest your virtues.
So, Mr. Charles, what will be your short-term and long-term goals in writing as well as being a leader?
My short-term and long-term goals in writing are approximately the same. I am on a mission to help people see that leaders are the moral artists of our time. The business leaders are the moral artists of our time. That's a difficult project because a lot of people tend to think business leaders are greedy, they're in it for the money, or they just assign themselves purposes out of cookbooks and try to get their employees excited because of that. But they don't have much depth. They don't have moral depth. I think that's wrong. All the leaders I have worked with have enormous moral depth. They're making moral decisions all the time. And I want their moral artistry to show. So the book is a book about the moral risks they have to take to do that, the kinds of people, the friends they have to fire and so forth, to succeed in creating these morally distinctive companies. Right now, I'm writing 2 shorter articles, again on moral artistry, but they're less challenging. So I'm finding leaders right now are taking time to morally restore employees who have fallen, who have gone wrong. They want to, instead of just firing them, put them on leave, and they want to bring them back, but they want to bring them back in a way that they can work with the people that they mistreated, and the people they mistreated they can get along with. And that's a very difficult thing. And that moral restoration is one of the things that I'm finding CEOs doing. So I'm writing about that. Another thing that I'm finding CEOs doing is they're willing to listen to different sources of truth in their companies and weld them together, not in a consensus, but enabling them to get along. You hear all the time leaders saying, I want one version of the truth. Well, the truth doesn't really work that way. The truth comes in multiple versions, I'm sorry to say. It's strong, courageous leaders that can accept that and bring together the people who have different versions and actually make them very creative in their own domains in order to make the business more successful. So that's the second thing I'm writing about right now. I'm hoping to do a number of shorter pieces on moral artistry of leaders and then maybe combine them together in another book.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Charles, and looking forward for more empowering books to come. So to wrap up our discussion for today, how can leaders ensure their legacy reflects both business, success, and ethical impact?
One of the things I say in the book is masterpieces never get completed. You're always refining your masterpiece. You're always working it over as a leader. You're always tinkering with the moral order. you create. And in order to have a legacy, you have to bring people on board who feel complicit with you in having taken the risks that you take to create that order. So you need to work with your team, identify the risks that they take, the moral risks that they take, and celebrate that success and show them how those moral risks add up to the masterpiece you have. One nice thing about masterpiece businesses is people both inside the business and outside the business admire the masterpiece. Nobody wants to let a masterpiece go to waste once you have a masterpiece. It's hard to maintain. You have to have people with the commitment to do it. But if you cultivate their moral imagination, cultivate their courage, cultivate their moral risk-taking, they will step up.
Mr. Charles Spinosa, thank you so much for sharing your books to the world. And we are looking forward for more empowering books like this. Can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Oh, absolutely. The best place to get my books, and particularly Leadership as Masterpiece Creation, is Amazon. The earlier book, Disclosing New Worlds, is also available on Amazon. I think the new book is really, really inspiring. And if anybody's looking to be inspired, please go to Amazon. Please take a look at the write-ups at least and what people are saying about it. And I hope you decide to purchase the book. And Daniel, I want to thank you for letting me have access to your audience. You're very kind. Thank you.
You are most welcome, Mr. Charles, and this podcast is created for you. So, Mr. Charles, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.